Good evening, everybody, and happy 2023 to everybody here. It is the first tasting that Möch is hosting this year. And I'm very happy that it's this one and that it's with all of you guys because you all look stunning, if I may say so. Well, most of you look stunning, if I may say so. So the last tasting of a Möch season, or the first tasting of a Möch season, basically the one that we do at the end of December, of the beginning of January, I have decided should always be a special one. And in this case, I made a little fun lineup, I think, with some products from the stables of Douglas Laing. And I asked Big Peat to throw in some fine treats and extra presents for everybody, but mainly some good whiskey. So I hope you'll all enjoy this. I also have asked somebody to talk to you guys, so I don't have to talk the whole evening. And that is Mr. Dougall Barr from Douglas Laing. Hi, Dougall.
Hey guys, how are we?
Yeah,
you have to all unmute and answer. It's okay. If you nod, I accept that everyone is fine.
They are all very well behaved, Dougall. They know they shouldn't talk too much, so. But they also know that they can use the chat function to ask any questions and do anything. If there's any tasting notes you want to share with us, if you wanted to ask a question, just put it in the chat and I'll pass it on to Dougall. And let's have a fun chat, I think. Dougall, how has the end of the year been treating you? Was it good?
Good. Yeah, it has been good. I think we were just talking about it. I averaged 2.4 events an event every 2.4 days in 2022. So I stopped for Christmas and New Year. So this is my first tasting of 2023. I had not talked to anyone about whiskey for nearly 2 weeks, which for me is quite a long time. So there we go. But yeah, no, excited. Perfect tasting, perfect lineup. It's probably one of the most varied lineups you could put together from Douglas Laing. So yeah, very excited for it.
It's also it's already the 5th of January, and so you're behind on your schedule of 2.4 events, 2.4 days.
It's all downhill from here, you know.
It's all downhill.
Yeah, I started with the best group I could possibly ask for, so all downhill.
I think the best thing to do, Dougall, is just straight away dive into some whiskey and get talking from that. The first one we'll pour is the Glen Garioch, the 2014.
Glen Garioch is what I have in the glass already.
I haven't yet.
Say definitely please everyone, as many tasting notes as you like. You never know, if you write as a very good tasting note, you could get a prize. Who knows?
Yeah, so, well, we should probably just announce that already. What one of the prizes that we're going to hand out, basically the top prize that we're going to hand out, is the Big Peat rain jacket. I have that one here, which is a really cool rain jacket. I have one of those that I can hand out. It'll be handed out at the end of the evening with the last whiskey, but you'll have the whole night to earn it. And what we came up with is the best tasting note that somebody gives during the whole night. That one will earn you the Big Peat rain jacket. All right. So the most fun, best tasting note, and Dougall and me will be the judges. Just put them in the chat. Yeah. So good luck, guys. Anyway, Glen Garioch. I'll put it on the screen for you, Dougall.
So my challenge for the evening is, because a lot of these bottles I never actually get the chance to have, so I have to go into our delightful archive, and so I get full individual bottle samples that look something like this. So this is pulled at cask strength. So what I've presently realized that I'm having to dilute down to get as close to 46% as I possibly can, because I can't start with cask strength for the rest of the evening. So yeah, this is an interesting one. So hopefully everyone knows Douglas Laing. I think we should I'll have a little bit of chat about the bottle first, and then maybe we can dive into a little bit of our history and where we are at as a company. But the Provenance series, this is really for a lot of people, single malt, single casks are incredibly desirable, but obviously tend to get more expensive as we go. So we get progressively more expensive as we go. So for us, the Provenance series is designed to be an excellent example of a distillery in a single cask, single malt format that is hopefully normally pretty accessible pricing wise. You're probably still looking around that €50 mark average for a single cask bottling. This is only just over 200 bottles. You're getting something pretty unique, pretty special, but hopefully at a nice accessible point. So that's what the Provenance series is all about. It's just about offering up a good example of a distillery, nice bottling. They follow a rough idea of 10 years, maybe 12 years and younger. So we want to really emphasize distillery profile here. We want to give you that big focus of this is a kind of a classic example of that distillery at this point in time.
Dougal, I think there's a slight mix-up because it's actually an old particular.
Oh, it's old particular. Oh, sorry, I must have given you the wrong one. In that case, I put the right sample.
I see what happened there because I sent you the DL, so the reference number, and it's DL15996, and the one you have is the DL15896. So it's just one.
I know why as well, because this one I believe was bottled only for the Belgian market, which is why I never tasted it. So there you go. In that case, we've talked about the Provenance series. Forget about that. We're going to move on to the Old Particular series, which is basically the next stepping stone. Now, Old Particular is probably what Douglas Laing is best known for as an independent bottler. It is probably our most recognizable. It is often confused as something called Old Peculiar, which has nothing to do with it. It is Old Particular. But the Old Particular should be our kind of classic examples of single malt, single casking, aged between 12 years up. So generally we're looking all the way through to even up to about 22, 23 years old can still fall into Old Particular. Now, the reason in this case is 2014, so obviously the maths doesn't quite add up there. If we get a cask that we feel is exemplary, if we get a cask that really stands out as something special, we're not necessarily going to put it into a provenance, even though it's 8 years old. It's really every single cask here and everything we sample tonight is judged on a cask by cask basis. So you know that we have selected something special. Now, Glen Garioch for me is a small place in my heart. I, previous life, worked for Beam Suntory with Glen Garioch underneath that big umbrella. And Glen Garioch, I think, is one of the most underrated whiskies you can find in Scotland. I think it is a phenomenal whiskey. It's generally notorious for this big, spicy nature. You get this real kind of black pepper spice on the finish that I absolutely love with a Glen Garioch. So still young, so you're still only that 8 years old or so. So still very vibrant, still quite crisp. Mine's not quite down at the strength that I'm happy with just yet. I'm keep on adding water until I get there. So
So is this actually, Dougall, because you showed you were talking about the Provenance one, is it it's a sister cask, the Provenance one?
It would have been very similar, exactly. So this is where we've basically had multiple casks, maybe 3 or 4 casks sitting side by side, and this has been the pick of the bunch. So this is where it gets moved into an Old Particular bottling rather than a Provenance bottling. So all of this is still controlled by the Douglas Laing family as such, or a family member. So each individual cask is nose sampled, and then we kind of decide where it's going, if it's going towards a provenance or if we feel like it's really something worth putting away or waiting a little bit longer for, then we'll direct it into Old Particular. So yeah, diving into on the nose, super light, super fruity. Not quite a vanilla bomb, but nice sweetness to it. Got a kind of.
Eric is also saying already it's a typical Glen Garioch nose. And I kind of agree. I love it too. Also, lots of fruitiness too.
Yeah, very much kind of fresh orchard fruit, maybe a hint of some citrus in there, but more like candied citrus. It's like super sweet and mouth coating. Almost like a boiled sweet or a lemon sherbet kind of feel for me. I love Glen Garioch, but Glen Garioch for Suntory has gone through a lot of changes and is changing again for anyone kind of following the journey of Glen Garioch. It's about to change dramatically. So when Suntory purchased or started buying out Morrison Bowmore and they inherited Bowmore, Lefroy, Glen Garioch, Auchentoshan, Glen Garioch was peated at the time. It was generally moving toward that peated style. And then they changed it, they overhauled it, and they redirected it towards being this kind of lighter, fruitier, more delicate Highland style. Then last year and a half or so, they made the call to basically go back the way. So within the already up and going in terms of production, but we won't see anything for a while. But Glengarioch has now moved back to direct fire stills and is going super peated. So they are totally overhauling Glengarioch as a style, if you like. So give it a few years, wait until it comes out. But they've basically gone for a classic style of Glengarioch, which existed back in the 80s and earlier. So really interesting. And to go back the way to direct fire, they actually got about 20% more efficient. So there's one of these interesting things that kind of goes opposite of what you would expect. But
so they got more efficient by going to direct fire.
Yeah, they've reduced their carbon footprint by about 20% just by going to direct fire. So because it's all very much new boiler, they're doing experiments at Glengarioch and Ardmore. Sorry, this is my Beam Suntory side. I'm a whiskey nerd like everyone else, but Beam Suntory is really doing some interesting things. But at Ardmore and Glengarioch, they're also doing experimentation with hydrogen power at distilleries as well. So a lot of interesting things. But yeah, the direct fire has made a huge difference. Yeah, interesting one. So this, as Eric said, typical Glengarioch nose. This is the Glengarioch of the last 30 years. That will change in the future. So this will not be the typical Glengarioch nose going in the future. But I think we agreed, Jordan. This would be a nice opener dram. I think it's light, it's fruity, super easy going.
I think if you look at the rest of the lineup, this is the one that everybody would have probably expected to be the first one in the lineup.
Yeah, I think so. Glengarioch kind of falls into that category. It's kind of a nice, breakfast whiskey.
Yeah. So Dougall, you were already saying that you came from Morrison Bowmore, but you've been with Douglas Laing for about a year now.
Yeah, about a year or so. So I worked with Beam Suntory. So I worked with Beam Suntory. Predate. I joined essentially just as the transition moved over from the Beam Suntory Morrison Bowmore, kind of two battling companies within the same umbrella. So yeah, Beam Suntory I worked with for about 5.5 years or so. I covered primarily Auchentoshan to begin with. If anyone ever did a tour Auchentoshan distillery, it may well be myself. So I started off as a tour guide. I then spent normally about 2 to 3 months each year on the production side at Auchentoshan. I then got the chance to go and spend a bit of time working with Bowmore and Glengarioch. And then for me, it was always the talking about the whiskey was more enjoyable than making the whiskey. Production's a bit monotonous. You repeat yourself each day, 8-hour shifts, and it's a lot of just pushing buttons. So I got a chance to really step into more of an ambassadorial side. So I covered the Scotch portfolio for a lot of the different events around Europe. And then from there, I realized this is kind of the direction I wanted to go and was looking for a slightly different challenge. Beam Suntory is amazing, don't get me wrong. And I only have good things to say in terms of the company to work for and some phenomenal whiskey in the lineup. Like I got to work with some great whiskeys. Douglas Laing is about as challenging a company as you can work for because I need to, instead of knowing everything about 5 whiskies, I need to know a little bit about everything. And that as a challenge is always interesting. So I like it because things like Glengarioch, Bowmore, for anyone that's followed Douglas Laing for a while, you'll see a lot of the same distilleries come up quite a lot, and you can work out who we have a positive relationship with. So we have had and continue to have a very good relationship with Morrison Bowmore and then Beam Suntory since their kind of takeover. So you'll see a lot of Glengariochs, a lot of Bowmores, a lot of Auchroisks released from Douglas Laing because we have phenomenal stock thanks to this historic relationship. Yeah, Douglas Laing is interesting. There's a lot of different challenges with Douglas Laing. We talk about a lot of different things.
Don't forget about your tasting notes, guys. I know you're still warming up, so there'll be better ones coming on later on. Tasting notes, I mean, but don't forget about that jacket. Shall we hand out another first prize, Dougall? What do you think?
I think so. It'll help warm everyone up as we get prizes.
I'll show you the prize. I have this nice little metal plate. I have 2 of those actually. One of them I'm going to give away right now, and the other one later on. So this is the first prize that one of you can win. What shall we do? Shall we do something random, or shall we do a quiz question, Dougall? What do you think?
I don't mind a random to begin with.
A random one to begin with. All right, perfect. I'll just share a little minute. Where is my screen? There is my random screen. And I'll share that with you guys. Can you see this? The wheel of names. Everybody should be on there. You can check on the right side. I have the alphabetical names by first name. So everybody should be on there. If you don't see your name, shout out now. There's also some people who are not here or not present here. If one of those guys wins, we'll spin the wheel again. All right?
Yep, you got to be here to win prizes.
You have to be here to win prizes. Otherwise, you can't really win. So let's spin. 3, 2, 1. There we go. Good luck, guys. The excitement is killing me.
Yeah, it's great. It feels like a whiskey game show.
Tom Mergaerts, you're the winner. So I'll get that plaque to you. So congrats with that. So there you go. That was the first prize. It can be as quick as that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, very cool. So should we move on to the next whiskey?
Yeah, I'm happy if everyone else is happy with that pace. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free, shout them out as well or interrupt me. I will happily talk for as many hours as you would like me to. But yeah, please ask questions.
I'll also just give you a little hint. Sometimes look at Tom Verbruggen on his screen, because if he's in the right, like this, you see a floating head.
That's good.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm in my glamorous home office.
Yeah. I'm in my home office too with Big Peat in the background. Dram number 2, and this might be a little bit surprising to you guys, will be the 30-year-old Auchroisk. So straight on to one of the big guns, the XOP 30-year-old Auchroisk. Very curious about this one. I didn't have this one before. The Glen Garioch I tasted before.
See, I think it is both surprising that we maybe take such a big jump to go from 8 to 30, but in terms of spirit profile and style of whiskey, if you like, I think it is the natural progression lineup as we go through. It should hopefully, for a lot of people, Auchroisk is not a distillery that they're overly familiar with, not a whiskey you see a lot of. It is these days underneath the Diageo juggernaut, so therefore it's kind of lost. You don't see much of it released as single malt, other than maybe occasionally Flora and Fauna series. But it's an interesting one. Most of it's directed into the blending side of the world, which for a lot of people kind of puts them off, like, oh, it must not be very good. But the reason they all end up in these big blends is because they're so wonderfully balanced. You get this amazing, well-rounded whiskey for them to then work off to produce a bigger blend. So this can be your real base notes in a lot of blends. So something like Auchroisk, like Glenrothes, like Glenrothes, these distilleries that don't release too much of their own whiskey. So you're relying on people like ourselves to release them, and hopefully you see a distillery that you don't get to try very often. In the XOP case, hopefully I've got the right slide this time.
Yeah, this is the good one. This is the right one.
Perfect. There we go. So yeah, so hopefully what we find with the XOP or extra O particular, this should really be our creme de la creme, the pick of our casks. Generally, again, not always, generally above 25 years old. So in this case, 30 years old. Smalling batch because you're getting older. You're talking in this case 200 bottles, but that's it. So you really are just getting kind of a snapshot of this one distillery at this one point in time 30 years ago. I think Auchroisk is always an interesting one. So the other thing I'd point out where we've got the tasting notes up, if you notice at the very end of the tasting notes, you'll see the initials CSL. So we put this, you'll be able to find it on the bottle as well, and you'll find it on any single cask bottling. So just on the end of the tasting notes, you'll find it there. So in any bottling from Douglas Laing in a single cask, you'll find the initials of who did the official tasting notes and who selected that cask. So you'll see it will only ever be 3 initials on it, or 3 sets of initials. One will be CSL, which in this case is Cara. So you can find out who did the tasting notes. So Cara is our 3rd generation of the Laing family. If you see the initials CGL, that is her husband Chris and her CEO. And if you see FHL, that is Fred, so the second generation Laing. So you can always find not only every detail of what we, as far as our tasting notes are concerned, every detail of bottling dates, alcohol, as always, no colouring, no filtering, but you also get to know exactly who selected this cast, did the tasting notes to give you that. That's like hopefully a slightly more personal feel to it. But something I like the fact you can taste it and trace it back to who wrote it. So if you ever meet one of them at a show, you can say you got it right or you got it completely wrong and you made it up and you have no idea what you're doing. But
the Glengarioch was Fred's work.
Yep.
I just checked. So FHL. That's cool. Well, there's lots of tasting notes coming in the chat now. I think this is one that people are getting more into. The first thing that was mentioned was glue, and then a whole lot of people started to agree with it, and then they started talking about which kind of glue. It's the yellow Patex somebody offers.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, sometimes.
But it doesn't taste like Patex, I think, says Tom. So he has never tasted Patex before.
I never know. It's good childhood memories. But
pineapple in a sauce of glue and chalk.
I get the chalkiness. I definitely get that. So for a lot of people, it kind of comes across as an off note. I wouldn't say it's not necessarily off notes as such. It tends to be a slight variation we get from a longer maturation. You sometimes find the spirit does go a bit glue-like or that kind of not chemical nature, not in the same way we'd mean with a Lefroy. It's not TCP kind of characters, but it is that slight spirity note is how we generally talk about it. So not necessarily an off note, but just it's gone in a slightly different direction in the cask. Across should generally still that very much. I see where some like pear compote is an excellent one like that.
It says it's a refill hogshead. So probably refill sherry hogshead? Or
no, with Douglas Laing, it's normally safe to assume it's actually ex-bourbon hogsheads.
Bourbon hogsheads, yeah.
Yeah, we don't do a huge amount with sherry hogsheads, and if we do, we're generally going to tell you about it. So we shout and scream about the fact that we have a sherry influence. So if you see hogshead with Douglas Laing, I would generally assume ex-bourbon, which kind of makes sense with that. I see a few people put it like that sponge cakiness, that slightly baking breadiness to it. You can expect it to go alongside more of an American oak ex-bourbon hogshead.
Also, of course, just the number of bottles, 200 bottles, is like more indicative of bourbon hogshead than sherry.
Again, at 30 years,
hogshead is the same, so of course.
It's surprisingly punchy for a 30-year-old. I agree with that. So mine is slightly higher, I think, than yourself. I think I'm up about like cast sample was clearly taken just before we bottled it, so it's a little bit higher. But yeah, up at that around about 51%, wasn't it? I think
51.2.
Yeah, so definitely punchy. Definitely has there's a bit of kick to it still.
So the XOPs are always cask strength, Dougall?
Always cask strength. So we have kind of two variations of the XOP. We have XOP and we have XOP black. And basically they are the same thing, but where the XOP black is that one stage further. It's where we did our 50-year-old Spaceside's finest, Glenrothes. And if we also did our 40-year-old Macallan, this XOP black really is that kind of top peak, which you're talking thousands of pounds of bottle. XOP though and XOP black will always be served at cask strength. With Old Particular, we generally have again a rough split. So we either have it at 48.4, which we think is a really nice balance of not quite cask strength, so not going to punch you in the face, but not softening and diluting down too far. So 48.4 is kind of our agreed upon point for our Old Particular bottlings, unless it gets a little bit older. If it's no particular plus 20 years old, you'll probably find it at 51.5%, just to make it more confusing to keep up with all our rules. Basically, what we try and do is just serve whiskey at its peak, at its best point. If we took a 30-year-old Auchroisk in this case and diluted it down and brought that down to 43, 46%, it would probably feel quite disappointing. It wouldn't have that punch. It wouldn't have that vibrant distillery's character there. We don't want to lose that. So we try and serve it up the way whiskey should be. Actually, untouched, unfiltered. So everything you sample tonight, even if you're talking about our blended malts versus our single caskings, everything is always natural color, everything is always non-chill filter, and everything is a lowest point is 46% alcohol. So you will never find anything from Douglas Laing unless it's a blended whiskey below 46% alcohol.
Oh. When did the ranges of all particular XOP, when did you start with those? Was that straight from the beginning when Douglas Laing was started out? Or?
No, it's a good one. So it's a good question. So Douglas Laing is a company, for maybe anyone less familiar with our overall history. We started in 1948. So just after the war, Fred Sr. So basically the company's gone through two different Freds. So Fred Sr., so Fred Douglas Laing, when he started the company, he was shipping champagne from Scotland to the United States, because Scotland is famous for our champagne production, and you can question that a little bit. Basically, following the end of the war, he was moving a lot, and he basically was working through France and into Scotland. So basically made a company based around shipping. And he made some connections in the US, and he got the opportunity to buy a brand name called the King of Scots. So the King of Scots blend from Douglas Laing, which we still make today, and it was actually still a very good blend. He basically got the rights to the name, he got a recipe, and he got 3 casks of whiskey. So that's what started Douglas Laing in 1948. From the first basically 20 years or so, all it was about was stockpiling casks for putting into blends. So it was about networking, it was about basically going out, creating relationships with distilleries to get liquid to make the King of Scots. King of Scots today is about 16 different single malts and 4 grain whiskies as a combination. That is our rough recipe for the King of Scots blend. So it took a long time to build up the stocks. When Fred Jr., so Fred's senior son, unsurprisingly, so when Fred came into the company in middle of the 60s, he basically came in, he'd already been groomed for whiskey. Fred was basically being taken out of school when he was a teenager, taken with his dad to South America on business trips, stuff like that, where he was off to Panama to talk whiskey at the age of 14. So Fred's got some stories, but Fred has been in whiskey since that point. He came in and he basically saw a slightly different vision, because he saw we had this amazing stockpile of single casks. Why shouldn't we release them as single cask, single malts? So the whole idea of independent bottling, we have no restrictions. We're not tied to releasing a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 21-year-old. We're not tied to releasing a certain style of whiskey. If anything, we can do the opposite. We can release whiskey that's interesting or different from the classic distillery style, which is really where we are very popular today, is because we get that chance to produce something a bit different. So Fred basically took company in a slightly different direction. We were separating out, doing blending and independent bottling. The old particular brands were a lot more modern. They're really only kind of developed in the last 20 years or so. They're much more modern brands as we kind of developed into a more modern company. Over the years, we bottled under lots of different ones. A lot of people will recognize us with the other side of the family, so the Hunter Laing family. This is the only mention I'll do of it, so no one asks questions. But other side of the family are behind Ardnahoe over in Islay, and also basically had a division in the company. So they took some casks, they still carry on the old malt cask name. So still some brands that you see around. Old Particular was our kind of modern move into the independent bottling side. So as a brand, kind of a little bit more modern, but as a concept, you're talking back to the 60s when we really started independent bottling things.
All right, very cool. I think it's time to hand out a little prize again, and it's a fun one. It's this little box I have. It's not just a box. It has a nice little scallywag hip flask in it. So another little fun thing I can hand out is funnel to fill it up with. So yeah, this could be somebody's, and this will be skill based. So you'll need to get your hands in the chat and answer a question. And it's a question that Dougall has the answer to, but don't give it yet, Dougall. It's how many casks are in the stocks or in the warehouses of Douglas Laing at any given time, round and about, or at this moment in time? How many casks do they have in stock? Everybody can have a little guess, and I'll find out which one of you is closest, and you will get the nice little hip flask.
Interesting. I see a lot of variation here.
Yeah, and also there's some random guesses and also very specific guesses. 134,890 is quite specific.
That puts us in the that puts us in quite a
250 is also a good guess, but maybe a little bit under.
Yeah, we wouldn't get far with 250.
How many releases did you do last year alone, Dougall?
Over 460 single cask releases in 1 year.
In 1 year, yeah. There's people regretting their guesses already now.
Yeah. Which is when you think about it, why my job is challenging, because people ask me about a specific bottle, and that's a lot of whiskey to try and sample in a year. So
yeah.
It's tough to keep up sometimes. But yeah, that gives you an idea. At the moment, with the kind of direction the company's going and our predicted growth, for every bottling we do, we have to fill and lay down 5 full casks. So we're having to really look forward into the future now and fill a lot more casks than we used to. So
I'll give you guys 1 more minute to get in some guesses, and then I'll have Dougall give us the answer, and I'll start calculating who won.
I think there's one clear winner, I think, at the moment. So
I could be. I haven't checked yet. I was just going to say that I'm eager to exclude somebody from participating because he's laughing at my pronunciation of hip flask. So but I'm not going to do it, Nonkalachil. You can still participate. All right, let's close off proceedings. Dougall, how many casks does Douglas Laing have in the warehouses?
At the moment, and because it is always changing, it's hard to give an exact number. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, we are sitting somewhere between 19 and 20,000 casks.
Okay, 19 and 20,000. Let's see who was closest. 14,500. 15,001 is closest.
Yeah, Jerry might have been the closest.
I think Jerry is the closest. Yeah, all the other ones are at least 10,000 off. So, Jerry, you are the winner. I'll get you the hip flask one of these days. So, congrats.
Perfect. So they say it's one of these ones that people assume that we set so much whiskey, but it's this constant cycling process. But if you think we're constantly releasing things all the time, and for us, the single casking side is nowhere near as big as the blending side. So we're emptying cask and cask and cask constantly. So it is a constant moving business. When the company split in two, we were probably closer to some of the other guests, maybe upwards of 30,000. But essentially, they kind of got divided between the two brothers, and that's where we spawned Douglas Laing. So we certainly, on average, somewhere between 19 and 20,000.
Chris's guess is 19,500. Was just
too
accurate,
late. Yeah.
Was just a bit too late, Chris. That's nice try. Maybe for the next one. Talking about the next one, let's pour something in our glasses. Is that okay? Let's go for the Glen.
I'd always be interested to see as well what everyone's thoughts were on the Auchroisk. Yeah. It's not a whiskey. Do we enjoy it after the glue nosing? Do we?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, because we saw some tasting notes, but not really any kind of like appreciations or what people thought of it. So I really liked it actually. It is very the glue at first, especially if somebody mentions it. It's very apparent, but then it gets quite fun to taste actually.
Yeah, so it's always interesting because I'm always intrigued because for a lot of people they assume that one odor is better, but
yeah,
it's not necessarily the case. But I do think you see that real. I think someone just said. I think Vincent said. Yeah, Vincent just said aftertaste keeps going. It's really where you see that older whiskey shine through. You see the aftertaste. You see the finish go on and on and on, even with a small taste of it still floating around in there. Definitely lots of cakey notes in there. I see some butterfruit cake. I saw that kind of vanilla sponge cake. There's definitely a real cakiness in that whiskey. But it's an interesting one because it's just not a whiskey you get to try very often. So always good to try something different.
Yeah. Now let's go for an older bottling because this the Glenrothes, the 17-year-old Glenrothes, was already bottled in 2014. So this one is a little bit a blast from the past.
Yeah, I need to pull something out because I couldn't find the sample because it's a bit old. So I will pull something out that's a bit different.
Yeah. But I do remember this one because I had this a couple of years ago already, and I do remember this as a really nice one. So that's why I wanted to have it in the lineup, basically. And they still had some stock of it left, so I was kind of surprised that they still had this. And while you're pouring, I'll put this. Well, I'll have you taste it first, everybody, and then I'll put the tasting notes on the screen. But for this one, since Dougall doesn't have it in his glass, we're going to rely on you guys for tasting notes. So go ahead.
I tried to pull something similar, or as close to as possible.
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you some facts about this one. 266 bottles, 48.4%. It's again a refill hogshead. Distilled September 1997 and bottled December 2014.
Yeah, so it was interesting to see the historic bottlings as such. So yeah, it's sitting a little while, but still, hopefully, and also for us, this where I mentioned already the fun thing about whiskey, and certainly from an independent bottler, you don't see many 17-year-old releases from people. There's very few out there. So I like odd numbers. I like interesting numbers. So 17 seems like a good choice because it seems very specific that this is when we released it. And like I say, we are generally noseling, sampling until we get to a point that we say, this is it, this is when we want to release it. We'll also maybe have a taste and say, oh, we can predict this is probably going to go well for another 10 years. So we can put it towards the back of the warehouse and forget about it for a little while. But generally what happens is we will nose and taste until it's at its peak, or as far as we view it as its peak. And then it gets bottled. So we're not bothered by, oh, but we need to wait 1 more year and get an 18-year-old. Let's bottle at 17, bottle it when it's good and ready, which is always fun.
Yeah. Also, interestingly, while on the Glen Garioch it said FHL, here it just says F. So at some point in time, you guys changed from just the first letter to the complete initials.
So the reason for that is really Chris and Carol only came into the company towards the end of 2013, 2014. So they really only came in that year. So this is the first time you'll be able to pick out any bottlings when we realized we had to do a change. Because until this point, Fred did all the tasting notes and chose all the casks basically by himself. For anyone that's maybe been familiar with Douglas Laing for a while, my predecessor Jan was often involved in tasting. Yeah, exactly. So Jan was often involved, and certainly I wouldn't like to say that I have contributed to anything because, of course, it will never say it on the bottle. But there's occasional bottles that I've nosed and sampled and done tasting notes for. But that's the background of the story. But it's an interesting one because now with the idea of the family members being in control, it adds that extra layer of story. It links for yourselves to the company. This isn't just some faceless corporation. This is now you can go and meet the people that do the tasting, pick the cask, and yeah, like I say, shake their hand if they've done a good job. Like Glenrothes is also one of my favorite distilleries. It's just one of these ones that I could drink a lot of. I find it to be a dangerous whiskey. I think it's a kind of whiskey that can disappear very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very quaffable is the word, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect word for it.
There's some tasting notes coming in. Fruitcake, cookies, sherry, wet pine woods, flavor a bit sharper, birch ending in citrusy, mostly an acidic lime flavor. Okay.
Ginger, dark chocolate, brown sugar. Okay, Moorish. Interesting. It's always good because for us, we're so reliant, and sometimes Chris or Cara or Fred or maybe lining up 6, 7 casks in one day to do the tasting notes, where you do end up, you try not to repeat yourself. And if anyone's read Fred's tasting notes, they're generally very, he works a lot of alliteration and does a lot of rhyming and poems and things like that. And it's very difficult to do when you've nosed 6 whiskies and you try and find new things and pick out different things and making sure you're not just repeating yourself. but we also have a distillery style that's always going to be the background. So we always have to get the right balance. I think we have to make sure that there's some interesting new tasting notes in there, but also some classics. So there is that element that you have to work. Sometimes the word's the hardest to come with. It's hard to pull enough adjectives to describe a whiskey sometimes that haven't been said before.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in this case,
it's easy to get to all the classic words, I think, like the vanilla and fruit and stuff like that. But yeah,
exactly. So Fred's very good at it. If Fred's tasting notes are sometimes out of this world descriptive. If anyone's ever had a Premier barrel bottling from us, the ceramic decanter bottles, he does the entire thing as a poem and rhyming all the tasting notes as well, which is a skill set which is amazing. But yeah, so Glenrothes is a whiskey that I think is, again, you see more of it now. As the last few years have built up a bit more of releases of their own single malts, but it's a whiskey that I think is super, again, missed over for a lot of people, but has one of the most interesting bottles. They're little, small, round, grenade-shaped bottle. I think it's a very satisfying bottle to have. But yeah, certainly it's one of these whiskies that I'm a big fan of. So
yeah. It's Glenrothes were the first ones that started with the vintage instead of the age statements, and then they went back to that. I think.
Yes, they've come back
now
around.
yeah,
back to age statements now. I think because, like all the small things, there's always stock issues and things like that. So, but it's always these interesting ones that the ownership has always been interesting in terms of. So they're officially owned by a combination of kind of Berry Brothers and then Edrington, and then it's going backwards and forwards. A lot of distilleries change hands all the time, and every time someone new comes in as ownership, they might take it in a different direction. So somewhere like Glenrothes, yes, you have a new marketing team come in, completely revamp it, and then they might change again. So certainly it's interesting to see what direction companies take. I like that, Kevin. Flows down like a river, smooth.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's good. So maybe next question will be what do you guys think about this this whiskey? But I'm gonna hand out a prize again because I can. This is the heaviest thing I can hand out. I have this nice little wooden plinth for Big Peat, Rock Oyster, Scallywag, and Timorous Beastie. No bottles included. It's just the plinth basically, but it's nice and heavy. And this one is a quiz question. So the first one to answer in the chat gets the plinth. We'll be celebrating a birthday on the 23rd of March of 2023. There will be a whiskey brand that turns 100 years old. And if you know that we're drinking Glenrothes, which whiskey brand will turn 100 years old on the 23rd of March 2023? Oh, Nick is very quick.
That was incredibly quick.
I think he's got the birthday marked down in his agenda or something. No, it's Cutty Sark. And Cutty Sark is of course a blend that Glenrothes is a big part of. So Nick, congrats. The plinth is yours. I'll just note that down.
That was incredibly quick. That was very, very good.
Yeah. So that's also the reason why trivia questions about whiskey is usually not a good thing, because these guys know everything. So
yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's all these distilleries were kind of just hidden away and utilizing blends and never got the chance to kind of really come through and shine. That Glenrothes in general produces phenomenally good whiskey, and it ages up really well, and it ages so well in different styles of cask. And there just wasn't much released. And like a lot of these ones, the one I poured as a kind of comparative whiskey was Altmore, which again is kind of in that light and fruity and amazingly useful for blends, mostly going to a lot of the Dewar's side. But these whiskies are so underrated, and it's kind of reliant on people like ourselves, like Gordon MacPhail, to release bottlings. Don't get me wrong, there's occasional times that I've had some interesting events where 5 out of the 6 independent bottlers all had an 8-year-old Kalila, and we're all just comparing whose 8-year-old Kalila was better. But there's always a different, that happens just with some of the bigger names. But it's the kind of little gems, the little real pieces that come up that you get phenomenal whiskey, and normally stuff you just wouldn't find the general companies or distillers releasing. So certainly why I like talking about it. I get to talk about really varied and interesting whiskey. So
now, what I also find interesting and well, fun basically to do a tasting like this is that bottlings like this one, like the Glenrothes, are actually quite affordable still. I think it's one of the reasons is that the ABV is not too high, so it's 48.4, so you get it a little bit lower. But these are actually, if you compare to other releases on the market, I think this is about 120 in the shops, 120 euros, something like that. So, which is for a 17-year-old whiskey.
Single cask as well. I think
single
that's one
cask.
thing you can't forget about. All these are single casks. Like you're getting such a small number of bottles out of each one. It's you're getting hopefully. As far I hope in this, I'm not here to really. I'm here to upsell a little bit, but for me, I'm hoping that it comes across that we try and bottle stuff that's good.
So I've just put up the bottle because Nick asked it, and also some the tasting notes. So for anybody who wants to know, so the bottle code is DL10564. If you want to find it, so DL10564. I'll put it in the chat, so that way you can always find it again if you're looking.
It gives an idea that so that DL number is basically it's been essentially chronological. So a lot of the cask samples we've already been sampling from are 1.5s up to now 1.6s. We're just bottled number 1.7, I believe. So you're talking that each one of them is an individual cask sample. So you're going back through quite a lot of cask samples just to get here. So it's nice to see the progression of where we've got to and what we've gone through in the past.
So this number 10,564 is from 2014, and so the Glen Garioch, which was bottled in 2022, was 15,996. So it's about 5,500 bottles in 8 years' time.
Yeah, it gives you an idea of that turnover. It's around that 400 number ish. So it will vary a bit, but it's this constant challenge of us. We want to always release stuff that's good and interesting, but we also find that it comes in cycles. So with certain distilleries that we have good supply of, like with relationships that some of the ones you wouldn't expect, they are still honoured today. A lot of people ask, how can we possibly put Macallan into Scallywag? And it's because we still have very, very good stock and very good supply of Macallan, which is not a name people expect us to have a good relationship with. So it's interesting. It's that kind of, we're reliant on these relationships to keep on getting access to the liquids. So yes, occasionally there'll be an event when there's 8 different independent bottled Kalilas, but hopefully each one is different. So,
for the next whiskey, Dougall, before I tell everybody what we're going to pour, I'll give away a prize, because if I tell you already what we're going to drink, maybe this gives away something. The prize is this, which is a doggy tray for the dogs to eat out of from Scallywag. Very cool little thing. So if you're a dog owner, especially good for you, or else you can just have your porridge out of this if you want to. I'm going to show you in the share screen, I'm going to show you a vintage advertisement for a whiskey brand from the 70s. And the first one who answers in the chat for which whiskey brand it is will get the doggy tray. All right? I'll start sharing. There you go. You can take anywhere. Wow, Peter, very fast. Well, it's there in the screen, on the screen, of course, the white horse, but it is of course white horse. Yeah. I'll show you the real brand. So this was a whole series of advertisements from the 70s for white horse. And the tagline was, you can take a white horse anywhere. This one was the most striking, I found, but you also had these ones. Pretty cool old advertisements. So it's white horse. And of course, white horse. Hey, I actually did the wrong question now. Doesn't matter. I was supposed to do it in a different order, but hey, don't care. Peter, the doggy tray is yours, and the next whiskey we're going to taste is the Mortlach.
Yeah, my dog will be very pleased with that.
Oh, you have a dog. Perfect.
Yes, of course.
It'll be an interesting one to go for if you didn't have a dog. Yes.
Yeah.
It's, I mean,
So-
different way of drinking your whiskey, but
Well, you can use it as a quaich.
we've all been in that position. You can't find
Sure.
a glass. You need a whiskey. It's whatever
Anything
comes
will
to mind.
do. Mortlach, 15-year-old Mortlach. This is also a recent bottling from last year, from 2022. Exclusively for Belgium.
Yeah, it's always my challenge as well, is finding the it's country exclusive. So Douglas Laing now ships to 74 countries, I believe, and we generally do a lot of exclusives for everywhere. So trying to track things down and get samples of things is always a good challenge. But yeah, for me, we mentioned people find it surprising that we utilize Macallan in Scallywag. Mortlach is a other big part of it, and we've just gone on from the Glenrothes. Essentially, you're seeing the kind of three core parts of our Scallywag bottling, each one kind of bringing something different to the dram. But Mortlach for me is one of these whiskies that still stands out as sometimes a bit odd, sometimes a bit weird for a lot of people, but it really, Scallywag really focusing in on producing a kind of real juicy, fruity experience with this big sherry influence. But how do we make that fruit juicy? It's with the oily nature of Mortlach. You get that kind of, it makes it feel like this juicy fruit exploding in your mouth. That is all Mortlach coming through. I love a dram.
Yeah. So if you do a bottling like exclusively for Belgium, it is selected by the Belgians then?
It is.
The
So
craft?
generally, within Belgium, it's Demonic, and with Belgium, it's Sunoco. So what will happen is they will come to us and say, look, we want to do a cask. They will then say, we want it to be around this age, this style, this alcohol, this cask. We'll then go into our catalogue, into our warehouses, and start going through. We'll probably select 5 or 6 that we think fit the criteria. Those samples get shipped over. They start sampling, tasting, agreeing on one, and then we will bottle it up. The fun for Douglas Laing is because you'll especially saw it with the Glen Garioch as well. All these labels are customizable. You can do your different styles on them and things like that. So we can personalize pretty much every aspect of it. All the detail of the bottle is still there. Yeah, there you go. Compared to our classic, I can do a side by side if you like. So, yeah, compared to our classic particular label, you get something really unique and really stands out. So that's a fun thing for us. We get to do some very unique ones. For anyone that's picked up any of our Big Peats or Scallywag exclusives, we can get even more wild with them. So it's always good. But I think for me, Mortlach is one of these whiskies. I think Mortlach is a whiskey lover's whiskey. I think you generally find the whiskey lovers among us will get drawn to it and find something that's different or interesting, really stands out. So that's where I sit with Mortlach as well.
Yeah, it's not the kind of whiskey that you offer to somebody who's never had a whiskey before, and you want to draw him into whiskey because there's too much going on. I think it's too complex usually.
But at the same time, like say you hand that or you open your cabinet to your whiskey loving friend, a lot of the time people will, oh, Mortlach, I'll take that one. It's one of those whiskies. It's a really good one. I'm big fan. So hopefully you get that, kind of what I was trying to talk about, that real juiciness. It feels like this like mouth-watering feeling. It feels like that kind of fruit bursting in your mouth. But
and again, it's getting kind of rare these days because this is again a 15-year-old whiskey. So it's usually a lot of the independent bottlings that you get nowadays are like 6, 7, 8-year-olds. The 15-year-olds, the 18-year-olds, the 17-year-olds are getting quite rare.
Yeah, so these ones that we're so lucky that Fred Senior established these relationships very early on, and things like We don't have contracts with a lot of these distilleries. A lot of these are still done with handshake deals from the 50s and 60s. Like, we have no paperwork to say we're going to provide you with this, but we're generally still getting liquid at a pretty steady rate. We are, of course, establishing new contracts. Some whiskies are being substituted out for others, but generally we still have phenomenal reputation because, one, we don't release bad whiskey. If we were releasing crap versions of different distilleries, of course the distilleries would be reluctant to give us the liquid. But if we were releasing stuff that's going to only broaden interest in their brand, why wouldn't they encourage that? If they've got the excess stock, why not? The other final point that I maybe say on this is we generally don't ever buy today aged stock. We didn't go and buy a 15-year-old, we don't go and buy an 8-year-old, 10-year-old stock. We are generally supplying filling contracts where we will buy 1,000 litres of spirit or 2,000 litres of new make spirit, age up ourselves. So this is where our expertise as a blender, as a bottler, basically going out selecting our own casks, that's what we can really bring to the table because we can go in a different direction compared to the distillery itself. So it's the elements that we can bring and hopefully bring interest to the brand. I don't think many people would say if they handed that as a glass of Mortlach, they would happily go and find another Mortlach, which may well be from Mortlach itself.
Where are all the casks together, or are there different warehouses that you have?
We are progressively getting more and more on site. So for anyone who comes to visit Glasgow anytime soon, Douglas Laing has been establishing what we're calling the campus. So the Douglas Laing campus is just beside Glasgow Airport. And basically we got the opportunity to buy 2 warehouses just there beside the airport, just on the south side of Glasgow. We have since added 2 more. We have then built a bottling line, so we have our own bottling, and we are progressively bringing as many casks as possible down on site to the same position. So we still have a little bit of spread across Scotland, but the idea is to have everything under one roof. We, in the last, just before Christmas, 2 weeks before Christmas or so, moved into our new custom-built head office. If anyone's following Douglas Laing, you'll have seen some hints at the new sample room and the new archive and things like that. But we're also, hopefully in the next year or so, maybe 2023, we will start breaking ground on our distillery there as well. So we were building, and the plan is to build our Lowland distillery just there on the south side of Glasgow. So this is the Clutha distillery for anyone that's been following us for a while. It's been a long time in the works. Certain things got in the way, one of them being a pandemic. But beyond that, we have slowly managed to find this position that we're happy with. So we will have warehousing, bottling, head office, really making this full campus experience with the distillery kind of as the crown jewels on the whole site. So in fact, I might be able to pull up some photos at the same time, but show you the new warehousing and things like that. So
yeah, I think you might be able to. I'll make a co-host so you can share yourself if you.
Perfect. Go and find some things. So yeah, in the meantime, that Mortlach I think is phenomenal.
Also, very good, Jerry, that you added a correction because your tasting note was ripe ears, oily and leafy, but you corrected that to ripe pears. So that's a little bit more usual. Funny, hard to describe nose, a mixture of marmalade with leather, says Eric. Okay. And then some green grass, like the green sheep background of Chris. So Chris, you have inspired Vincent to a tasting note, which is also quite nice. So
yes, I like that because tasting notes are so subjective. So it's all fine for us to say, well, this is what it tastes like, but tasting notes are so personal. So I can do, hopefully this will work. Let's see.
Yeah, tasting notes are personal, and also I sometimes have the feeling that we are talking about the same thing, but everybody uses different words for it.
It's a challenge, and also for the biggest challenge you have if you're wanting to do tasting notes is just making the link. It's the words. Everyone can taste all these subtle differences, and you can find all. It's just putting it into words. It's the link between what you're tasting and nosing and putting it into a word. I'll just share my screen one thing just very quickly to show you our new Big Peat warehouse. So that is one of our warehouses. So we've got 4 that size. So each one will be able to hold about 5,500 casks, somewhere in that range. But where that photo was taken, the back is onto the busiest road in Scotland. So for us, we have roughly, it's about 55, 60,000 pairs of eyes go past that every single day. So it's the best piece of marketing we've done in years, but that is our new Big Peat home, if you like. So now, if anyone comes to visit Glasgow, you cannot miss the home of Douglas Laing. So.
Well, that character, that Big Pete character, we'll talk about him later, but I think he might be the single greatest marketing move you guys have ever done.
Potentially, it's, again, I appreciate we'll talk about him later, but Big Peat is about 25% of the whole Douglas Laing. It's a huge part of what we do today.
Yeah,
and I'm doing my best. I'm slowly trying to cultivate the Big Peat look.
Is it company policy? Does everybody need to have a Big Peat look, and also does everybody need a fox terrier?
I say no fox terrier. My dog Jura. I work in whisky. My dog's called Jura. What a surprise! But she is not a wire fox terrier. No, she is not. So I was allowed into the company. But my name is Dougall, so it's probably close enough to Douglas that I was allowed in. I think that's probably the main reason I got the job in the first place. So.
All right. Listen, the Mortlach, really nice stuff. This is a recent bottling from 2022. You can probably still find these in the shops nowadays. But I think they were also really nicely priced. So it's a good one, I think. Whiskey number 5, and this was the one that I actually associated with the White Horse advertisement, because Craigellachie is one of the main components of White Horse as a blend. So Craigellachie is the next one we'll have. So, but nobody noticed that I did something wrong. So no harm done there. This is also an older bottling. This was bottled in 2019, and it's a 20-year-old Craigellachie.
Again, I've had to substitute in. I've had to go sadly, only for a 15-year-old Craigellachie.
Oh, so yeah.
Life is hard sometimes.
Life is hard. I think you have some other stuff flying about there too. So.
Yes, I think it's maybe the one thing that I can never complain about is the access of whiskey that I get.
So yeah, guys, go ahead with the tasting notes with what you think about this one. This one was bottled at 51.5. So as you were saying earlier, this is one of those examples of an old particular that was bottled at 51.5 instead of 48.4.
Yeah, it's an interest. Again, it seems like a very random choice, but just because this will be skewing slightly older and we just want to make sure we're kind of maximizing what we're offering you, we feel like offering something plus 50% really gives you, often with these older casks, the distillery style starts to become more muted. It gets a little bit more delicate, disappears into the background. To help counteract that, we can serve at cask strength. If you took an older whiskey and watered it down, a lot of distillery character is going to disappear entirely, and then you just get cask influence. We still want to find the distillery in there. Hopefully, the Craigellachie does follow that match.
So one of the interesting things about this is a sherry butt, as it is marked on the label, and it's only 208 bottles. And does that mean that a lot of evaporation happened, or that part of it was bottled for something else?
Essentially you've nailed it. 2 options that could have happened here. One, it may well have been, was this another Belgian exclusive? I think it was.
No, it's not a Belgian exclusive. No.
But occasionally what may have happened is we might have taken one half as an exclusive for one area and one half bottled as a general bottling. So we might have the same cask split into 2. We might also find that we can occasionally remove, say someone wants a 15-year-old, maybe they took half that cask and left the other half maturing for a longer period of time. So there's lots of different ways that we can get to that number. It's pretty unlikely that there was that much loss from a full sherry, but really probably what we're looking at was a split cask.
Yeah.
But it's that first time, and again, asking about the hogsheads, if it's a sherry cask or sherry butt, we're definitely going to talk about it. And the same with a sherry hogshead. You'll generally find we talk about a sherried hogshead if we ever use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does say sherry butt on this one. So
yeah, and safe to assume that is Oloroso sherry. If it's Pedro Jimenez, Fino, anything else, we'll really be quite clear about talking to. So even though we do not necessarily say it's Oloroso, 9 times out of 10, it's a safe bet to say it was Oloroso. Now, again, talking about the progression, we discussed this lineup quite a lot, how we want to put it together and what order. Mortlach to Craigellachie is just like the perfect stepping stone. They're like brother and sister in terms of style. Craigellachie, you still get that meatiness, that oiliness, that kind of real richness in the dram. But Craigellachie goes more towards this, sometimes comes across almost like a puff of smoke, not really, but it's a more intense dram compared to the Mortlach.
Craigellachie is another one of those that's not an easy dram, I think, an easy whiskey. It always fights a little bit, it fights you back, I always feel, Craigellachie.
Yeah, has definitely, again, I can't remember who said earlier on, a punchy whiskey. This is certainly, often Craigellachie falls into the punchy category. More meaty than Mortlach. Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting, recent event I was doing, for anyone that's, again, follows Craigellachie, you'll probably know Matthew Cordner. Now, Matt's basically my equivalent with Craigellachie, and I got him blind tasting some of our Craigellachie independent bottling side. And it's really interesting. What we've done is make sure that we still have the DNA of Craigellachie is there. It was different to everything he had at the show, but still 100% Craigellachie. And for me, that hit the nail on the head. That is exactly what we are trying to achieve. We want to bottle a Craigellachie that if you know Craigellachie, you find Craigellachie there, but it's also different to everything they do themselves. It's great to hear it from their own group, if you like, from their own representatives. So, but that's exactly what we're doing right, I think. It's just bottling stuff that's different or interesting. Yeah,
that's basically the definition of an independent bottler, I think. Because otherwise, if you bottle the same, why would you bottle it?
And that's a lot. You'd be surprised about questions I get asked, like, "Oh, what do you bring to the table? Well, if you're just putting liquid in a bottle, what do you actually do?" Well, it's our choice. It's how we release. It's the wood choice. It's the maturation length. It's every small aspect around it. If we're, again, it's for a lot of people, that number changes. Sometimes it's 70% the cask influence, 30% the spirit influence, 80%, 90%. It's so whiskey dependent. But even if we take 70-30. We've taken the 30% of the spirit, but then 70% is Douglas Laing. 70% is our choice of wood, our maturation. So 2/3 of the final spirit character is basically proven with us. It's our choice, and it's how we release it. So,
if you had to, could you? Because I guess in the single cask bottlings or the all particular ranges, it's not really doable. But is there like a thread going through all of the bottlings that you do that you can recognize this is Douglas Laing? What would be the red line running through everything?
I guess would be the kind of the 3 core principles of high alcohol, non-chill filter, non-coloring. So no matter what whiskey you get from Douglas Laing, it follows those 3. So you're always going to get kind of, hopefully that non-chill filtering comes across. I chatted to Fred about it, and that choice was very, very conscious to make sure we were serving at a higher alcohol and non-chill filtering to allow that higher alcohol. So you're not losing any of your fats and oils. You're not, basically, it allows us to serve higher alcohol without it being overpowering. So you get more distillery influence. That's maybe the rough DNA that could run through. It's hard because we are working with hundreds of different distilleries. It's hard to find it. I think for us, it's about, one, we have very, very good marketing in terms of the bottle style. I think one of our other signatures is how much detail we put on the bottle. I think it's becoming more common now, but Douglas Laing has always put huge amounts of detail in terms of ever asking in the chat there about what's the cask number, all the detailed distilling dates, everything like that. That wasn't really that common for us. We do that in every single bottling that we offer. So I think it's transparency. I think maybe it's more an ethos that you can trace through for Douglas Laing rather than a necessary tasting, things like that. Our most kind of recent campaign has really been focused on this idea of fanatical about flavor. What we want to do is serve up whiskey that's good. Doesn't matter, just ideally you try it and you enjoy it. Stop worrying about what it is, what age it is, where it's from. Full raw basic whiskey tasting is when you put it in your mouth, do you enjoy it? Do you want to keep drinking it? So we want to produce whiskey that fits that category. We want to produce whiskey that people enjoy drinking.
I guess it's probably easier to find like a signature in the regional malts than in the single cask bottlings, because the single cask bottlings are so widely varied, and the single
Yeah.
regional malts are more like a specific choice that you always keep repeating because that's a flavor profile.
Even then, there's still fluctuation. I think, like, again, it makes sense when we get onto Big Peat towards the end, but there is a DNA that runs through every single of the 6 RRMs. We have a DNA that runs through them. We basically have an established recipe, but that recipe has huge fluctuations because I think people again forget when we put the blends together, it's single cask, single malt marriage. So we're still working with single casks. So we're still the variation that we have to then rely on Fred and Chris and Cara to put together. It can sometimes take 2, 3, 4 times going back and back and back. We could put a batch together the exact same way from the previous batch in terms of the casks used, the ages of them, and it can taste quite different to the previous batch. So there's such fluctuation in there that we're really relying on them. So like COVID is always very nervous because if you lose your sense of taste and your smell, it becomes a big challenge for master blending and blending together. So when I was still working with Beam Suntory, the 5 people that were really in charge of the Beam Suntory Scotch portfolio didn't see each other, didn't sit in the same room. They had all their samples sent to their house so that they could still do nosing and tasting, but they did not come in contact with each other because if any of them start to lose their sense of taste and smell, that's 5 Scotches that are entirely off the market. So it's an interesting one, but its consistency is the biggest challenge in producing the blended malts. We're, like say, less concerned about it in single casks because they're not supposed to be consistent. They're supposed to be different. Whereas, something like a blended malt, because we don't use a huge amount of it in terms of numbers, it's not like we're putting 16 different malts. It's not like a Johnny Walker Green Label. We're not putting huge numbers in there. We may only be using 2 or 3 or 4. So that's a really small number. So there's quite a big chance of fluctuation there.
Maybe back to the Craigellachie before we head over to the next dram. What's interesting is that there's not a lot of tasting notes coming up. I really enjoy this one. It's a really fun whiskey for me to taste. But I think the tasting note from Kevin kind of sums it up. It's a fight in my head for finding tasting notes for this one. It feels like walking the Great Glen Way some years ago. I mean,
it happens. Yeah. Also, I think Tom as well has hit it on the head. That musty, oily, earthy, quintessential classic Craigellachie. Like it tastes like being in a basement floor. That's kind of where you're at.
I'll just put the official tasting notes on the screen there.
Yeah, so again, this is Cara's tasting notes now, so we can jump ahead a bit. But yeah,
Cara.
Buttery, creamy, spicy. So you're seeing a lot of the cask influence in this one. It makes sense with this older whiskey that maybe the Craigellachie mustiness, and you really have to know your Craigellachies to start picking that out. What you really get first is the cask influence here. You're seeing that big sherry butt influence come through as the baking spice, little bit of spice coming through in every single element, the nose, the palate, the finish. It shows where kind of cask starts to take over. And people always ask, what's the best whiskey you've had? I bet it's really old. It's not. When you get older and older and older, you don't get any distillery character. You just get the wood influence. And sometimes it just tastes like wood. Whereas this is kind of in that nice sweet spot where we're still getting classic Craigellachie notes with the complementary piece of the cask coming through. I think it's the nice sweet spot. Often I find that is as soon as you start getting, it starts to disappear.
Yeah. And again, it's 20 years old, which is getting rarer and rarer these days to find these at kind of affordable prices still. So
again, I'll happily be honest, like we suffer the same as everyone else. Everything, all prices have gone up, but things like people would expect, like the cost of the glue and the adhesive that we use to put the labels on, the price of that's gone up, the label pricing has gone up. A lot of glass was made
bottle
in Ukraine.
Prices,
it was huge. A lot of label production is done in Finland. Like you have a huge, massive industry reliant on it. So, and everything got expensive. So,
yeah. Talking about expensive, shall we go on to the Big Peat 27-year-old?
Yep, I need to get my sample.
Maybe wait, before we do that, you can already pour that, but I have something to give away again. Because I almost forgot. It's again a hip flask. So I have another one of these nice little scallywag hip flasks. So this will be a quiz question. You can Google it if you want to, but if you know it, then you'll be the quicker one. So the scallywag label has the fox terrier, the nice little doggy. What was the name of the original fox terrier that is featured on the label? Aha. So if you know the name, the hip flask is yours. No, it's not Scallywag. Scallywag is a nickname, which means like a rascal. It's not Tom. It's a good guess though. I don't know if anybody will know this. Well,
It's a hard one.
yeah, it's a hard one, and it's not on every website. It's not even on the Douglas Laing website. It's on other websites.
Yeah. It is maybe the one thing. I don't have a bottle of Scallywag with me. Give me 1 second.
It was Fred's dog. It was the original because it's a whole line of fox terriers apparently. That like a dynasty of fox terriers.
So always good to have props. But
yeah,
the dog. Well, we're trying to think of a name. I'm going to try to hold this up. So it's kind of hard to see. But
yeah.
On the top, you've got a missing tooth because that is accurate to the original dog. So not only is that Fred's dog, but there's actually a tooth missing from that, and that is accurate to Fred's dog at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Matthias.
There we go.
You have the right answer. Congrats. It's Binks. I was just going to give everybody a tip. And I was going to say as a hint, it's also the surname of one of the most hated characters in Star Wars, Jar Jar Binks. But yeah, Binks was the name. So there you go, Matthias. The hip flask is yours. I'll get it to you.
Excellent.
Go, Matthias. And
Yes,
meanwhile, everybody has the Big Peat 27-year-olds in their glass, so there you go.
Yeah, and Binks sadly no longer with us, but there is a new Wire Fox Terrier. There's always a new. All the way through the Douglas Laing family, there has always been Wire Fox Terriers, which is why they developed Scallywag. And as we move into Big Peat, Big Peat was started in 2009 by Fred, which I'll talk about in a moment. Scallywag was the second of the blended malts because they decided that we should have man's best friend. So we had this big and smoky Isla dram. Let's give up something rich and sherried and nice and sweet, and then this kind of like complementary piece. So that's why Scallywag became the second of the regional malts. So Big Peat 27. Now,
yes.
Again, unfortunately, I was not able to get a glass of Big Peat 27-year-old because there is no meth. So I have got Big Peat 26-year-old. So I've got the previous batch.
I think for those people who were joined us in 2021, December 2021, I did a tasting that was dedicated to old blends with all kinds of 60s and 70s bottles of old blends, and we had this bottle actually as the finisher, as the 27-year-old. So we had the same one at that tasting, but I just thought it was so good, and they still had a bottle left, so that's why I included it again on this tasting.
I guess this is the fun of producing a blended malt like this, is we have some phenomenal stock going into it that you just get something that is hopefully doing exactly what we wanted to do. We want to capture Isla in a bottle. In this case, the more elegant, delicate side of Isla, maybe, but still quintessential Isla experience. Yeah, but maybe for hopefully everyone is vaguely familiar. Big Peat is our most, as I said, this is our most famous brand. This is definitely far above what we're maybe most recognized for. Big Peat was Fred's creation. He was first created in 2008. Fred was marrying them together. And basically at the time, 2008, 2007, 2009, we had a overstock of single malts, especially single casks weren't really selling. And we especially had an overstock of malt from Isla. So Fred started playing around. He wanted to create a blended malt anyway. So he started moving it around. And what he created and what he put together was this combination. So you have a combination of Ardbeg, Bowmore, Cailleach, and Port Ellen. So those 4 distilleries married together, which he thought was like the perfect example of Islay. It should also be noted that Fred and also Cara's favourite whiskey growing up was Port Ellen. And Fred Douglas Laing Sr., he was very much a Port Ellen fan. So that is the family we're talking about. Cara's first memory, she's talked to me about it as well. Her first memory of whiskey was the smell of Port Ellen off her grandfather's breath. So it's a good family whiskey memory. So you can know they're in good hands. So the idea was to create this dram to, one, utilize stock that we were sitting on that was not basically being sold at the time. But at the same time, blended malt in 2009 is not where blended malt is today. Really, your main competitor then still kind of is, but gone in a very different direction with something like a Monkey Shoulder or a Johnny Walker Green label later on. So you've got some big names out there, but it was not produced in this way. We were producing blended malt to be perfect examples of this idea of making this perfect whiskey in terms of a balance, but still using single cask, single malts, still working with high alcohol, still non-chill filter, still natural color. So we were really trying to produce a whiskey for whiskey drinkers, but at the same time, utilize all the different styles and DNA of different distilleries in there. So Fred put this all together and he was taking it around different shows. And he was really finding it challenging because people would just turn their nose up at it. People would say, oh, I don't want to try a blend. Why would I want to try a blend? Blended whiskey's crap. Blended whiskey's rubbish. I don't want to try it. So Fred would have a bottle of basically his mix of Big Peat on the table. He would then have an unmarked bottle underneath and say, okay, totally understand. I've got something else and something really special. Do you want to try it? So he'd reach under the table, pull out the other bottle of Big Peat that he brought along with it without a label, pour a glass of that for the person at the event, who would then go, oh, amazing. Yeah, this is an amazing Islay. Oh, this must be Port Ellen. So instantly, people are just this snobbery, this idea that somehow a blended malt was not as good as a single malt. All we're working with is this base concept that the sum is greater than the parts. It's this idea that you can produce something bigger and more rounded and more layered than a single malt because you're just using single malts as ingredients. Same way if you limited a chef to one ingredient versus a chef to 4, 5, 6 ingredients, then you can produce something really different, really interesting. So Big Peat kind of spawned from there. And now today we've got over 20 people in the world with a Big Peat tattoo. We've got it plastered all over the side of our warehouses. We have this huge cult following. It's our longest running limited edition. And in the 27-year-old, you see the pedigree, you see that we've been putting this together for a long time. I think that's always what comes through to me with Big Peat, that we've been doing this since 2009. I think it really shows that we've had 13 years of practice. Well, sorry, no, 14 years of practice about to be, but we've been putting this together for such a long time. I think it's got a really strong identity, which I love Big Peat. It's an absolute classic, isn't it?
These black editions, like the one we're tasting now, the 27-year-old, the 26-year-old you have in your glass, these were one-offs because when are you going to do them again? Because these are really good.
It was a one-off, of course, with the nature of it. When you start looking for that age of stock, it's interesting. Probably the one we have the most stock of is Port Ellen. So it's a different challenge to have. We are very lucky that Fred had the foresight to realize that we should get as much of this as possible before Port Ellen closed. So we were essentially trading when they were selling stock off. We were basically trading King of Scots blended for Port Ellen directly, basically litre for litre. So we did very well in the early 80s. So it's probably the one we have the best stock of. Everything else is obviously very, very limited. To have this very aged stock, it makes sense in some ways to do it as a Big Peat. But if we put a 27-year-old Big Peat out versus a 27-year-old Ardbeg, Bowmore, and Cailleach, there's a trade-off. So all I can say is there's some really fun stuff coming out this year. So 2023 is our 75-year anniversary. And if anyone kind of followed our 70th anniversary 5 years ago, we released some really fun stuff. So we've got some really interesting whiskies coming out this year. Not necessarily around, actually, there's some very fun Big Peat stuff coming out this year. Maybe when we turn the recording off at the end, I could reveal a little bit more. but there's some really fun Big Peat stuff that we've been working on that we are very excited to release. But again, the blended malt side kind of allows us to play around a bit more. This is the ones that maybe we can do some really interesting finishes on, or we can play around with casking and things like that, because they allow it. There's a bit more chance to do that.
So guys, you heard it here. Stay until the recording is shut off, and then somebody remember to ask Dougall what is happening with Big Peat in 2023. So
I can't guarantee what will happen this year, but I know
No.
there's a few that are definitely in the works that I've already started to see with samples of. So there's some fun stuff coming out.
Yeah. Talking about fun stuff, I have another giveaway, and this is the best one, I think. Even better than the jacket. I have the Big Peats bobble hat, woolen cap. I have one of those to give away. I really enjoy these. I had two, but I just kept one for myself because I just love this stuff so much.
Brand new as well. They only released in December, I believe. So
yeah. So this can be yours. It's another trivia question. I don't think it's something you can look up, but Dougall knows this. I'm looking for a country, and it's the country that buys the most Big Peat, or in which country is the most bottles of Big Peat sold.
Yeah.
I'll give everybody a chance to have some guesses in.
Okay, get some variation there. Good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Just keep on guessing a little bit, and then we'll announce the winner. If you really don't want the cap, either don't guess or guess something really strange, like Luxembourg or something. It's
Oh,
not
you gave away
Luxembourg.
the answer. Yeah.
It's not Luxembourg.
Maybe it's one thing. It's one thing that's really interesting is hopefully everyone does know that the full regional malt series from us, the 6 bottles we have, all have really interesting differences in the market. So when I reveal Big Peats number one market, it's totally opposite to maybe something like the Epicurean or Scallywag. It's really interesting to see what parts of the world the number one for us is, and it's totally different across the world. It's really interesting to see different countries around the world and their different tastes and what they appeal to. It's an interesting one. So because we have that variation in the 6, they're all basically broken down by flavor profile. We can really hone in on what flavor profile works where. It's really an interesting one.
Okay, I think most of you have gotten in a guess. The most fun ones are Vatican City, I think. Russia is a good guess, but I don't think at the moment that's quite feasible.
Yeah, not much going there.
Not much going on. There's actually 2 people with the right answer, but I'll give the hat to the first one who gave the right answer. So Dougall, what was the country?
It is France.
It's France. So Vluby, it's yours. I'll get the cap to you. I get the hat to you.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people would expect that for French drinkers. Maybe yourselves, based in Belgium and the Netherlands, but France drinks phenomenal amount of Big Peat, like unbelievable amounts of Big Peat. But if we compare it to somewhere like Taiwan, which people expect to be maybe something like Scallywag, big and rich and sherried, our number one in Taiwan is actually Epicurean, the lightest and most delicate and fresh. So it's really interesting to see that might tie into making highballs and things like that as well. So every market has different variations in how they serve it, how they drink it. But yeah, France is our number one market, and actually is our basically number one market for all the regional malts. France is our biggest market. So,
what is the best seller in Belgium? Would that also be Big Peat, maybe, or?
It's either Big Peat or it is potentially something like Scallywag. It's normally for us, especially we generally view places like France, Belgium, Germany as kind of tier 1 experienced whiskey drinkers. Perfect group to talk to us about. You guys have had some whiskey before. So what people tend to skew for is big flavor. So that either goes one way towards peat or the other way towards big sherry influence. So that's kind of what we see as the balance. The newer stepping into whiskey nations, or also especially hotter nations, maybe ourselves over here in Europe, tend to skew more towards the lighter ones, the mixability, the long drinks, but also just fresher, more vibrant whiskey, which is probably why we see something like Epicurean do really well in a more tropical climate. So.
All right. I always hope to see more of Goldrons and Rock Island, because those are my 2 favorites. But
Yes, also my two favorites. Excellent choice. But yeah, Gauldrons is an interesting one because until basically last year, we were still doing batch after batch after batch because of how hard it was to get Campbelltown liquid. What I can say is going forward, we have no concerns with liquid anymore. So Gauldrons is going to be consistently produced with more limited editions like we did this year. So the kind of sherry edition and the cask strength edition that we did this year, you can expect to see more limited editions, more Gauldrons.
That's very good news. More Gauldrons. I'm happy already for tonight. I was happy already, but this makes me really happy. So there you go. Maybe to make everybody even more happy, shall we do the Bunnahabhain?
Bunnahabhain sounds good.
So we're going for the 30-year-old Bunnahabhain XOP, which is, I think, probably for most of the guys here, one of the bottles they were looking forward to tasting. So for me as well.
Sadly, one that I didn't have any stock left of, so I have to find a replacement.
So guys, just for the facts, I'll give you the cask number later on. 40.4%. So we're coming from the 27-year-old Big Peat was a 48.3. This one is 40.4. 262 bottles, and it's a refill hogshead again, bottled in 2020. So distilled in November 1990, bottled in December 2020. And it's CGL. So this is Chris's choice, I guess, then, Dougall. CGL, yeah. And the bottle code is DL14565.
Yeah, luckily, while I don't have the sample with me tonight, I have been lucky enough to sample this whiskey before. I was doing some tastings with it last year, and it is excellent. And I like the detail there already. Who's that? Kim again? Yeah, this old Bunnahabhain really shines through. I think it's just wonderful. It's, again, for a lot of people trying to find like the perfect Isla experience. An old Bunnahabhain for me goes in there. A young Kalila goes in there. So it's these sort of variations that you get, but it's just a wonderful dram. It's elegant. It's everything you expect for something older. It's got depth you're looking for. It lingers and it stays and it stays and it stays, but it's really layered, just like all these different notes to pick out.
It's kind of amazing that it's just 40.4%.
Now, this wasn't a split cask, so that is a genuine alcohol loss in there. So one of these ones that we always have the risk of, and if you ever take your eye off a cask and you see it go below 40% and you've made a big mistake, is always slightly disappointing.
Yeah, you can always use it for like a 30-year-old black edition for Big Peat.
Sorry, is that what we're hoping for now? Yeah, okay. Well, it's funny now because the stock that we're still sitting on for Port Ellen is, of course, getting ridiculous. So, our 1983. So, yeah, a bit of quick maths when you're talking the youngest Port Ellen that we're now sitting on is approaching 40 years old. It's getting more of a challenge.
And they're not getting in too much of a risk of going below 40?
Some we are looking at whether we put it in RCD, so essentially basically taking it out of wood, but we tried to avoid that as much as possible. So the ones that are progressing we'll probably be more likely to release sooner, and then we'll hopefully see develop, because we also don't want to see them over wooded and become boring or lose a lot of the dimension of Port Ellen. So we want to again release stuff when it's good. So we can take it out of wood and do something with it in the next year or two afterwards, but
I don't know about you guys, but I'm really enjoying this one.
Sweet caramel candy in the mouth. Yep, I can see that.
Vluby just copied his tasting notes from Whiskey Base. Are they yours, Vluby? Not
Nope.
not even yours.
Not even mine. And it is a great one. Just a pity that it's only 40.4 ABV.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people would struggle to believe that that was us releasing it at cask strength, but there we go.
Yeah, it's maybe a nice little discussion about cask strength, because this is cask strength, and a lot of people always want things at cask strength, but you can also have cask strength at 40.4%. So
I think it's maybe even for me coming into whiskey in the last 10 years or so it's changed a lot in terms of attitudes. I think people realized that this obsession with either cask strength or 100% sherry matured, and that's the only way it should be, and you don't possibly add water to it, and all just kind of came from the wrong attitudes. There's good whiskey at every alcohol. There's good whiskey at every age. It's just different whiskey. So you can have amazing cask strength, in this case at 40%. In the same way, we've already done some great cask strength whiskies up plus 50%. Like, there's always these chances. When we finish with our Big Peat, you're still up plus 54%. Like, you can have cask strength everywhere. You can have good whiskey at every range. I think that's maybe the one thing. Once you get into your whiskey, you really start to realize that there's not necessarily a good or a bad. Just because you like one whiskey at cask strength doesn't mean you'll like every whiskey at cask strength. And it doesn't mean that every whiskey won't benefit from a few drops of water. It doesn't. Whiskey's so personal anyway. My favorite thing about it is you can have a group like this where everyone can sit and talk and say, I get this, I get this. Everyone's probably got a different favorite whiskey of the evening. That's the perfect thing about whiskey, is there is no right or wrong, really.
I think Vincent is asking a really good question, and something that I was going to talk about anyway. But why did we put this one after the Big Peat in the lineup? Since it's not peated, it's lower in alcohol, and we still put it after that one. So, what's the reasoning behind that, Dougall?
Two reasons. One, it's about maybe the more nuanced, if you like. So the older Big Peat is still it's still Big Peat, I appreciate, but it's still reasonably soft around edges and has these kind of 4 primary layers that are going on. With something like the Bunnahabhain 30, I felt like there was more layered elements in there that can make it a slightly more interesting dram towards the end. Also, I feel like it deserved to be kind of put up towards the pinnacle before we blast everyone's taste buds off with Big Peat at the very, very end. So for me, it could have easily happened. I wouldn't ever claim to be the perfect lineup in terms of, we could always reorder this. We could easily have swapped the Craigellachie and the Mortlach. I think we could have moved things around a little bit. I felt like it was maybe one of the ones that has the most layers to sit and pick around. So one that would maybe put towards the end for us to sit and pick out these individual layers. That's my view of it. It could easily have gone beforehand, and I would happily hold my hands up if you think it was better beforehand. But there is always a challenge when you have a large dram list for putting together. When you get into 8, 9 whiskies, then it becomes more challenging.
It's something that and the people who were there at that tasting we did, I think it was a year and a half ago, the one with Bert from Astamorris. We did a similar tasting where we had the second to last one was also like a bigger, I think it was an older Kalila, something more powerful, and then we finished up with it like, I think it was a 29-year-old Glenlivet bottled at 40.1%, but it still stood its ground and still held up, because, and the thing I learned from that is complexity always wins. If the dram is complex enough, it'll stand up even after something more powerful or more heavy than before it. So, like,
if we'd been tasting the classic bottling of Big Peat, just the standard expression of Big Peat, I would have put the Bunnahabhain before it. But the 27-year-old with that age in there, the softness to it, the slightly more elegant style of it, I think it works in this order. Again, like I say, I'm happy to hold my hands up and say, no, we got it wrong and we should have done the Bunnahabhain first. But like I say, I think there's so many elements to that Bunnahabhain, so much going on, that you can sit and digest it over a longer period of time. And hopefully no one feels like their taste buds have been killed The other argument would be we should have put Bunnahabhain second.
Even second, like instead of the Auchroisk.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, it's one of these ones that often people have this gut feeling that we should put that one at the very end because it's the oldest. Like, never start your night with never finish your night with the oldest whiskey. Always start your night with the oldest whiskey. Finish your night.
Maybe we should do the tasting again in 2 weeks' time and just do a completely different order and see how that ends up. If everybody's up for it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. It's one of these challenges that I have because I do a lot of tastings, unsurprisingly, and it is always that case of the gut instinct for a lot of people is, it's the oldest, we should finish with it because it's like the final, you've reached the mountaintop, glorious dram. When really the best benefit from being, we should do all the XOPs first, all the lower alcohols first, because everything else is generally creeping up there. So we could have easily done XOP.
Just to remind you guys, we're getting to the last whiskey in the lineup, and I've been penning down the best, in my opinion, the nicest, the most fun tasting notes all evening long. So it's now your time to add some to that if you still want to get a chance to win the raincoat. Before we go to the last whiskey, I'll hand out the last of the other prizes, which is again one of those really nice little, it's not little, it's big. It's a big metal plaque for Old Particular. So if you want one of those, again, a little quiz question. You could look it up, but it's more of a guessing game. This is according to one website I found, so I don't know if it's really accurate, but hey, there you go. If you took all the whiskey barrels in Scotland and put them in a line after each other, how long would that line be? It's in kilometers. So just put your guesses in the chat, and we'll see who gets closest. Just before we go over to the last bottle in the lineup, which is basically the one that gave me the idea for this tasting. It's the Christmas bottle for Big Peat, of course. So, do you know the answer, Dougall?
Do I get to win?
Oh yeah, you can win a plaque if you want. You can win a plaque. I can send it to you. But
every whiskey barrel.
Every whiskey barrel in Scotland. If you put it head to head in how long would the line be? Some really nice, crazy guesses. Crazily varied, I'd say. They go from 15 million kilometers, 53 million kilometers to 15,000 kilometers. So, yeah. Deconstructed. Noncolashili is putting every stave in a big line.
So are we talking, do we take into account the larger stave of a sherry butt, or do we take in
it's just butts, butts and barrels and pipes and everything you can imagine in one big line. Maybe we should also agree now if one person can have two prizes or not. Yes, they can. What will your guess be, Dougall?
Yeah, so I feel like I need a calculator for this.
He's calculating. Wow.
Yeah, I got to see. See, I think there's a lot of big guesses here. I feel like I'm feeling more small guesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like it's.
Again, I can't really vouch for the correctness of the answer, but I found it on one website. So I'm not going to mention the website because everybody's going to look it up then. There we go. I think guesses are over. Dougall, your last guess?
I think I would have gone smaller than everyone here. I think I was probably floating around the 3.5, 4,000 kilometers. Something like that.
3.5 to 4,000 kilometers. Well, I can tell you, you're not going to win.
Yep, I thought so. I can never remember how many casts are actually in it.
Well, I found this on, there's a little trivia section on the website worldwhiskeyday.com. And they claim it's 20 million casks in Scotland, and it should add up to about 30,000 kilometers.
Okay.
So 30K kilometers. And I think Vluby is again closest with 28,000. So Vluby, the plaque is yours. There you go. And Eric, I know you counted the hidden and forgotten stock, but that's not included in the count. So next to your hat, Vluby, you'll also have a metal plaque to put onto your wall. So there you go. So guys, yeah.
I once visited the warehouses of and the distillery of Loch Lomond, the factory.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that they have 2% of all the barrels in whole Scotland in their stock, and I was calculating their number that I remembered.
Okay.
By 200%, and then an average cask of 0.9 meters.
We've got engineers present, guys. We've got engineers.
So, and then afterwards, I thought, is the barrel upwards or downwards?
Yeah, I don't know. It according to worldwhiskeyday.com, it's 30,000 kilometers. But there you go.
Thank you.
I think, guys, it's time to finish up with, as I said, the main reason this tasting is happening, because I was looking for a nice little theme for an end of year or a beginning of year tasting, and I wanted to do something with like presents and fun stuff. And there you go, the Christmas bottling for Big Peat. What is a better reason to do this? So there you go, the 2022 Christmas bottling. Enjoy.
Yeah, served up at a delicate 54.2%.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also be interested to hear from Vincent, if you're still in there as well. What do you think you would have preferred, the Bunnahabhain before Big Peat 27? If you feel free to throw it in the chat. But as always, so yeah, Big Peat. We kind of already talked about how we got to Big Peat. The Christmas edition is now our longest running limited edition that Douglas Laing has. So Big Peat launched in 2009. The first Christmas edition came out in 2010. So this is getting up to there. So it's our 12th year of doing it as such. 54.2%. This one and each one before it, there is always a variation. And it's one thing people, again, have to get into their head with these. These are single cast, single malt marriage, but we can play around with the limited editions, because rather than stick to the way we try and produce Big Peat consistently, we can offer up something that's hopefully a bit different. So this one is Ardbeg focused, if you like. So it's kind of Ardbeg dominant, followed by Craigellachie, followed by Bowmore, followed by Port Ellen. So hopefully that makes sense when you get to natural tasting itself. With Big Peat, I always get Craigellachie on the nose, Bowmore on the palate, Ardbeg on the finish. Is generally my journey through Big Peat. Interesting. Visit. I can only apologise. I hope that you don't feel like it ruined the Bunnahabhain for it. Good. I like it. But I'm glad that you still enjoyed it. But I'm glad to see that there's maybe a variation here. But it's the challenge. So, and now we finish with Big Peat Christmas. So we'll blast everyone's taste buds off, and you'll never taste anything again. So I always like Big Peat because you get your money's worth, because you can, even if you only have one small glass of it, you keep on tasting it for another half an hour.
It's actually really bad from a point of view of wanting to sell more bottles, because you don't need much from this.
No, I think it's one of these ones that we have. So Big Peat really does have a cult following that there's, I think, because we've got the recipe right and we're consistent with it, and you know what you're getting. And if you really want to give someone that Islay experience, I think Big Peat is a wonderful bottle to hand over. I think it really is. I think we do exactly what we say. It is designed to be a balance of Islay. It's not Ardbeg, it's not Bowmore, it's not Craigellachie. It is a balance of the island. We want you to imagine standing on a beach in Scotland. It's the middle of summer, so of course it's raining sideways, and you're being hit in the face by the rain and the salt and the sea. That's Big Peat in a nutshell. And then you have this barbecue blast of ashiness coming through. So always limited edition, always small batch. The Big Peat style, if you like, the every year we kind of try and come up with something different. Of course, it gets more challenging because we're doing so many limited editions of it. But always, the Christmas has such a good reputation now. I think a lot of people are looking forward to see what we do with it the next year. The hint at next year, I won't reveal too much, but there's a next year's is quite different for Big Peat Christmas. So that's all I'll say on it just now. We're a year away, so next year's Big Peat Christmas is quite different to the other Big Peat Christmases. I think it's also just a wonderful finishing dram. I think after 7 whiskies, you can feel a bit palate's getting a bit numb. You're starting to, it's getting harder to pick out smaller characters. So then you just come through with a big wave of Big Peat. It is such a good rounding off whiskey.
I just saw the tasting note from Francis, and he said something about an agave finish. I'm quite curious what you mean by agave finish. Do you mean something like vegetal or grassy, or? You can unmute and just talk if you want to, Francis, if that works better for you.
Or maybe more even like a earthiness to it.
Yeah,
it's quite earthy.
the mic doesn't work, and it's fast typing.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you mean. Bit of mezcal influence there. For me, that's the Ardbeg coming through, that kind of ashiness.
Oh, a sherried Big Peat. Have you ever done that, Dougall?
I mean, I wouldn't like to reveal too much of things we're working on in the background, but maybe that's one of the things we're working in the background. This year, we did last, or sorry, not this year, keep on forgetting it's 2023. In 2022, we did the Big Peat Sherry Storm, which was a Big Peat matured in sherry casking. Online whiskey, if you like, so it was online exclusive from douglaslaing.com. But we saw how well that did, and we will be doing more sherried Big Peat in the future, so for sure. So Eric, you will not be disappointed. There will be more. It's interesting though. This is actually when I'm having sampled through a lot of the Big Peat Christmases. In fact, I recently did a tasting of 7 Big Peat Christmases back to back as a tasting, which is difficult because you think you're basically signing up to do the same thing, but they are all very distinctly different. And a lot of people do have, again, that kind of vintage idea. They have a year they really liked. I really like this year's. I think it's really well balanced. I think it's really fresh, whereas last year's I wasn't as keen on. This is also the first time that we've kind of seen the movement towards the next generation Douglas Laing. So Fred was not really involved in the creation of this Big Peat Christmas. This is really focused on Chris and Cara taking it forward. So this is kind of their direction they have started.
Okay.
So it's that nice kind of moving on to the next generation as such. So.
Okay. How are people enjoying this one? Pretty curious. Next tasting, a vertical Christmas tasting. Okay. Good idea, Francis. So many tastings I still need to do. Okay, guys, while you're having your your last chance to put in a really memorable tasting note, just do it. Yeah, I'll take this opportunity to make a little bit of some promotion for something I'm doing for the next couple months. Actually, it has not really anything to do with Douglas Laing. So I'm sorry, Dougall, to take this time for you. But
no, please do.
I felt that we kind of forget about the classics or the ordinary stuff, if you want. So I'm actually hosting in the next couple of months 6 online tastings in which we'll taste every flagship single malt from every Scottish distillery that's about. So every 12-year-old that you can imagine, basically, from the big names, the Glenfiddich, Macallan, Dalmore, whatever you want, but also the Royal Bracklass of this world. So every whiskey from every Scottish distillery that you could consider their basic expression. So we're tasting all 61 of them in 6 tastings. So you'll at the end of that, you'll have tasted all of the basic expressions. It's called the Moog Classics Club because I feel that those are all classics. We'll do them in batches of 10 for each tasting. You will all get them blind, so you can get to taste them blind, get your tasting notes and scores in, and then on the evening itself, we'll reveal what every sample was. So you can find that on the website right now. I haven't made too much promotion about it yet, just on Facebook up till now. But I'll be doing some newsletters later on. So if you want to join for one or more, you can join for 1 tasting, 2 tastings, 3 tastings, or for all 6 of them at the same time. You'll find all information on the Moog website. I'll put the link in the chat too. So if you guys want to join, that's fun. Yeah, Chris, as you said, it's 7 tastings actually. So it's 6 tastings with all the basic ones. And then in December, the 26th of December, Boxing Day, we'll do the last one, which will be a lineup of 7 18-year-old official bottlings. Just because we can. And in that tasting, we'll finish up. We'll do all the conclusions for the 6 earlier tastings and see what everybody thought about all those classics or basic bottlings. So there you go. If you want to have some fun, it will always be on the last Tuesday of the month. So March, April, May, and then September, October, November. Every last Tuesday, we'll get together for the Moog Classics Club. And if you sign up for all of the tastings at once, you'll even get a special unique t-shirt to wear during the tastings that says member of the Moog Classics Club. So there you go. And samples will be sent 3 weeks in advance. Yes. There you go. Some promotion, some advertisement. I know, Chris, I know you're not available, but Tuesday was the best date for me. And that's even more important. There you go. All right, maybe back to the Big Peats. Is there anything else you would like to add to that, Dougall?
No, I think hopefully, like I say, I think Big Peat does exactly kind of what we say, but maybe it's one of the ones that is people expect to be overwhelmed by Peat. They're expecting maybe I don't know, an Octomore or something like that. Like they're thinking this is going to be smoke on smoke on smoke. It's actually not. Generally, we find Big Peat is really well balanced. I think Big Peat is just think more about Big Peat as a name and a character than necessarily saying this is the peatiest thing out there, because it's not. It's really designed to capture Islay. That's kind of its purpose, and that I think we do really, really well. But like I say, this year's Christmas, I'm a big fan of this year's Christmas one. I think it's an absolute brilliant whiskey. But one that is even at 54.2. I don't know if anyone's added water at all. I don't think it really needs water, which I think says something for it. I think it highlights the liquid going in here. Big Peat and most of the regional malts were generally averaging about 8-9-year-old, somewhere in there. So they're not 3-4 years old. We're not using brand new out of the cask whiskey. We're generally using stuff that's a bit aged up and a bit more balanced to get a little bit more of this layering process going on. But yeah, I think Big Peat shines through because we've been doing it for so long. I think it makes sense that we've had this amount of practice to put together something very, very good. But hopefully everyone agrees. I think the Big Peat Christmas is consistently, again, normally around about that €50 mark. You get great cask strength Big Peat.
Oh yeah, it's great value for money, I think. These bottlings. So I'm a big fan of Big Peat, the whiskey and the character, because I just love the character too. So there you go. It's also probably because I'm a bit grumpy. hey.
Listen, when we do this tasting again next year, my beard will slowly get out. I'll get more Big Peaty for.
You should feature on the label one day. You should have your own bottling of Big Peat.
I might need to put in some more years of Douglas Laing first, and I don't know if I can
Yeah.
justify getting a Big Peat Dougall label or Big Dougall.
Big Dougall. Listen, Dougall, we have one more important thing to do, which is select, well, the best or the most fun tasting note for the night for the winner of the raincoat. I've actually been reading every tasting note that has passed here, and I've selected five
Okay.
different ones. Yeah,
I've got three. So.
You've got three. Okay. What's best? Do you want to just give your three, and then, or shall I give my five and you choose the best one? And if one of yours is not in there, we can add them.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. Would you like to go with your
I'll do
five
that
first?
I'll just give the tasting notes and don't say who wrote them.
Okay.
And I won't even say about which whiskey it was. You can guess which whiskey it was. You probably have noted it down too. So the first one I noted was very early on, was a pineapple in a sauce of glue and chalk. I really liked that as a tasting note. Okay. Then the second one was a really nice one, I thought, was it flows down like a river. That was a nice little tasting note I found. I did mention this one, feels like walking the Great Glen Way some years ago. It's really evocative, I think. Another nice one was smells like an old tractor stuck in a peat bog leaking oil. I guess you can all guess which one that was. Yeah, and then the last one is probably a little bit more prosaic, but also pretty nice, is it's a whiskey that reminded this person of having a piece of lemon sponge cake with sugar glazing while sipping from a cup of Westminster tea.
So I had a couple different ones as well.
Okay,
but
cool.
There's one that we agreed on that I think should be our winner, since we both agreed and we both picked it out.
Okay.
One of my favorite ones was the flambéed banana and pineapple. I like flambéed banana. It's often a good tasting note. The other one was mead flowing over sponge cake. Again, wonderful.
Mead flowing over. I didn't even read that. Maybe somebody sent that to you.
I think that was early on. I think it was very early on. But yeah, okay. I also had smells like an old tractor stuck in a peat bog.
Oh yeah.
I think smells like an old tractor, I think, is a wonderful tasting note.
It's just just enough.
I will do my best to get that a tasting note somewhere that it smells like an old tractor. So yeah, I had Peter's tasting note as well. So
that's the winner for you?
Yeah, I think Peter should be the winner. We both agreed. We both picked it out separately. Yeah. So I think
there you
Peter
go.
should be the winner.
Peter, it's of course it's the Dutch guy that wins. So we do a tasting for Flemish people, and it's the Dutch guy that goes away with the main prize. So there you go.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
No worries, man. Congrats, really nice tasting notes, and I'll get the raincoat to you.
Thank you.
Cheers, man.
I mean, it was a Big Peat tasting note with the gentleman with the best Big Peat beards, so it all ties in nicely. So
yeah. We are of course a little bit biased to facial hair. There you go. All right, guys. If there is any more questions, now is the time. Otherwise, I'll close the official part of the tasting, shut off the recording, and send Dougall on his way. Don't think there are really any more questions after a tasting like this. So that leaves me thanking you, Dougall, for your time for the first event of your year. And I hope to see you live in Belgium one day soon, or maybe in Scotland somewhere. Thanks a lot. And everybody else, thanks a lot for being here, celebrating this another year gone by for Moog and another new year starting for Moog. So I hope to see you soon in many more tastings, online or live or other events. So bye-bye, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me, Jordan. An absolute pleasure. What a way to start off 2023. Quite a lineup. I don't think you'll have many 8 whiskey lineups for the rest of the year. So a good warm-up.